What can we say about the art of living for ourselves? I submit that the art of living is simply the art of controlling your thinking. Neuroscience is at the core of beating stuttering, the core of our methods. It's also the core of making your life the most pleasant experience that it can be. Living at peace with yourself and your life comes down to what psychiatrist Frank S. Caprio wrote in Helping Yourself with Psychiatry some 80 years ago. We, you, have free choice to accept or reject thoughts. Nothing compels us or you to think anything except your own desires. So, use your mental switch to dictate your thoughts. Believe that you can improve, and you will. I can think of no better way to end these brief remarks than by repeating the Serenity Prayer, which reflects much of what the slave Epictetus taught us and gives us a wonderful guide for our conduct. Grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, and the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This, my friends, is what those much wiser than we suggest is truly the art of living.
Lee, who might be the most well-read person I've ever met. Marcus Aurelius' work in particular, for me as well, has been a really big influence on my life. So for anyone that hasn't gone into some of the authors Lee is talking about, Lee, it never ceases to amaze me that you have read every single thing I've ever come across times 10. So really, it was great to hear you every time you talk, I'm impressed because the pace at which you go, the things you talk about, but then on top of which you're talking about authors that for me, and clearly I'm not the only one, have had a very big impact on my life. It's just cool to hear your reflections. So great job, and appreciated the speech.
Thanks so much, Joe.
It was an amazing speech, and I wanted to ask, at what age did you realize that stuttering is curable?
You know, that's a very good question, and no one has ever asked me that before that I can recall. I'll have to hesitate to think about it because, you know, I'm one of those people that sort of thinks if I got a shot, I'm going to try, and whether or not maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. But I don't think I thought about it in terms of I know I can beat it. I don't think I thought that. And when I was that age, the incurability doctrine was not being broadcast much. But when I went to a psychiatrist, when I didn't know where else to go, frankly. And I told him I had stuttering and I needed help. And he said, well, I don't know any way to stop stuttering, but he said, if I were you, I would get into self-hypnosis. and he recommended Melvin Powers' short book, Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis. And I got into that and started giving myself 3-a-day treatments, which I did for years. And then I sort of slowly stumbled on different tools, crutches and speech plans that helped me solve the problem. I started working on self-hypnosis around age 26, and I was not stuttering by around age 30. And I was still fearing it until almost age 40. But I was talking nonstop and not stuttering in my 30s.
Really like the way that you were speaking very slowly and having a lot of pauses. My question is, how did you put yourself into that habit of speaking more slowly and adding more pauses to your speech, especially when it comes to day-to-day conversations with people?
Good question, Ebros. My speech is probably too fast in most conversations, but when I'm giving a presentation anywhere, I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm doing that. So I'm thinking about crutch 11, if you will, speak like a king. That's on my mind, and I'm trying to follow. I'm trying to practice what I preach, drink my own Kool-Aid, as it were. So when I'm talking here, I'm better than if I'm talking to you in a coaching session. But I try and do, all we can do is try, Ebros. But the answer to your question is practice. Everything is practice.
I really enjoyed the speech. I have a pretty short question, actually. In one of your answers, and I think you also mentioned it in one of your books or multiple, you mentioned that you like poetry and you like to read, especially rhymed metered poetry. So I do too, and yeah, I think it makes it very easy to do it with passion and with modulation, and I would like to know if you have any recommendations. I mean, especially poetry where that rhymed metered with that rhymed metered poetry.
You walked into my web, said the spider to the fly. I will send you a document full of recommendations. I call it my reading document, my reading aloud document. I enjoy, you and I have only talked once or twice, I think, and so we're still getting acquainted. But with most of my students, I have, I like to read to them and I like them to read to me. You and I haven't gotten to that, but reading aloud, before there was television or radio, people read aloud in the evenings around a table to each other for entertainment. It's fun. Reading aloud is great fun. It's practice. It's a form of performing, and it's fun.
Hi, Coach Lee. I understand that we are not supposed to think words before we speak, but in important situations where we need to make a good impression, when we should think before we speak, how do we go about that?
Good question, but think thoughts, not words. If you're giving a prepared speech, it's different. You may want to write it out and read it, or write it out and memorize it. That's different.
Okay.
But in conversation, like right now, what I'm saying to you, my brain is much more able to think words than I would ever give it credit for. I need to think no words. I might make bullet points of thoughts that I want to discuss, but I don't think the words. The problem, Dante, with stutterers is that it takes 4 things to stutter. First thing, we got to hesitate. Second thing, we've got to think a word. We've got to fear it and force it. A stutterer can do all four of those things in a millisecond simultaneously. But if you don't do all four of them, you'll never stutter.
Okay.
So we eliminate the hesitation, which thus does not give you or me time to plan, to think and plan words. When you and I don't have time to think or plan words and just babble, as I'm doing now, it's impossible to stutter. You say, oh, I could on a first word. No, not unless I thought about it, feared it, forced it first. I'm not going to do that. If I did think of a word, which I don't, but if I did and feared it, before I forced it, I would use crutch to say that word.
Okay.
I would then link my words to a stop. But we don't think words.
Wow. Excellent speech, Coach Lee, as always, And thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And I have a question. If you could summarize the philosophy by which you lived in one sentence, what would it be?
You've got to be more specific than that. My philosophy about what?
About life.
Oh, well, you're asking me to boil it down to one point, and I don't know that I can do that. I think what you heard me say today was close to it. What's most important, Fatimata, depends upon where you are in life's curve. And most of the problems that you personally have, that guys would get, and there are plenty of them that guys would get, I've had, and I got over them, and they're part of my past, and I'm dealing with another phase of life and a whole different battery of problems. So I think the answer to what I need to focus on at a given point in time varies with the chapters of my life. You want to say every decade's a chapter, that might be fair. In your 20s, you're dealing with one set of problems. In your 30s, they change a bit. And in your 40s, as you mature, they keep moving around. But I think dictating your thoughts, not accepting anxiety and anger, I think those would be true.
I wanted to just thank you for the book that you wrote, the book on happiness, and I still think about those concepts of laugh, love, learn, logic, dedication, and I try and bring those into my life on a regular basis. So
I'm glad to hear it. Thanks for mentioning that. That is a book that I wrote for my grandchildren before I ever did anything in the way of books for stuttering. But I do think, it's as simply as I could put it, and I enjoyed writing it, and I do believe it, and I'm glad that it's meant something to you.
I'm going to say that was an amazing speech, and I wanted to say thank you for helping me become a PWSS. That was it.
Our pleasure. Thanks, Talib.
Such great talk, like always. I always look forward to your talks. I always take something out of it. And I don't really have a question. I just have a comment. I just want to say that being in this program had allowed me to get better control of my thoughts, since you have to master your not thinking words, reinforce them. I kind of like transfer those thoughts into like stuff that I struggle with. And now I don't really suffer from anything like anxiety, depression, anger. I'm able to control those thoughts.
And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So you're a living, walking example of what we're trying to do here. If the sun should tumble from the sky, if the sea should suddenly run dry, If you love me, really love me, let it happen. I won't care. If it seems that everything is lost, I should smile and never count the cost. If you love me, really love me, let it happen, darling. I won't care. Shall I catch a shooting star? Shall I bring it where you are? If you want me to, I will. You can set me any task. I'll do anything you ask. If you'll only love me still. When at last our life on earth is through, I shall share eternity with you. If you love me, really love me, then whatever happens, I won't care. Whatever happens, I won't